Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Coming up, what's it like to defy gravity for even a moment, to spin like the Earth's rotation doesn't matter, to release your emotions through your body, and to do it all in front of thousands of people. We'll talk with the founder and members of the Trey McIntyre Project, a dance company from Idaho that's lifting people's spirits all over the world. Dialogue is next. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. Dance is for everybody, said the great choreographer Alvin Ailey. I believe he said that the dance came from the people and that it should always be delivered back to the people. I'm guessing that my guests today would agree with that philosophy. They're members of the Trey McIntyre Project, a dance company founded in 2005 that made Boise its home in 2008. Since then, TMP, as it's known, has gone on to stage a virtual explosion of creativity, both here and abroad, dancing for both traditional and non-traditional audiences. For its efforts, the city of Boise named the group its first cultural ambassador. And recently, the U.S. Department of State and the Brooklyn Academy of Music chose TMP to represent the United States in a tour of Asia in 2012. Now with me here in the studio, in a short gap between trips to New Orleans, Boise, and Italy, are three members of TMP. Trey McIntyre is the founder and artistic director of the group. A longtime choreographer, he worked with many companies, including the Houston Ballet, the Oregon Ballet Theater, and the Washington Ballet, before forming his own company. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you very much.
Also here is John Michael Shirt, who's both a dancer and the executive director of TMP. Shirt danced with several companies, including the American Ballet Theater in New York, before joining TMP. Nice to see you, John Michael.
Thank you so much.
And also here is Ashley Werhun, a native of Canada who danced with Ballet British Columbia before coming to TMP. It's great to meet you.
My pleasure.
And before we begin, one note, as this is a taped program, we won't be taking any phone calls. Well, first of all, thank you. Gosh, you have such a short window of time to do this, and I really appreciate you being here for our viewers and for me to learn more about your dance. Let's start by talking with each one of you. I mean, children, lots of children are interested in dance, or at least I hope they are, and moving their bodies. But talk about each of you, your first experiences when you realized that the dance form itself was something that you wanted to pursue, both physically and emotionally.
I began because I was a music theater kid, and I was also very short and fat. So like 9, 10, 11, I would go to dance auditions and didn't really have coordination to be able to make it through the audition. So my mom put me in ballet class just to try to get that together. And for me, it wasn't especially exciting to begin with. Early ballet training is very rote and square and repetitive and difficult. And I was a really creative kid, so that wasn't really what I was looking for. And I would oftentimes go and my mom would drop me off for ballet class, and I'd go get a Slurpee or something next door. But because I was such a creative kid, I immediately took this new material. If it was pen and paper, I was making a drawing. Well, in this case, it was ballet vocabulary. So I began choreographing right away. And I always tell the story that the day I began choreographing was one day that I was skipping class, and I was in the parking lot showing some friends some steps that I had made up, and my teacher was watching me through the window of the class that I was supposed to be in. And she came outside and asked me what I was doing, and when I told her, instead of punishing me, she said, well, why don't you come inside and teach us to the rest of the class? And I thought that was a pretty good idea. And so it was really that little bit of creative teaching that, for me, my whole lifetime of being a dancer and being a part of a company was always focused toward being a choreographer, and that was always my bent more so.
So that started around...
that happened when I was 12.
12.
Yeah.
12. And what about for you? I think it was even earlier for you, yeah?
It was, yeah. I grew up in South Georgia, which is not really the epicenter of dance in America. And the local dance school was putting on the Nutcracker, and they wanted one of my 2 older brothers to be in the Nutcracker. My mom said, I don't think they're interested, but my youngest might be. And I started, like a lot of kids, the Nutcracker was my entry into the world of dance. And I wasn't so serious about it. And again, being from South Georgia, it wasn't an accepted thing to do. I played football, basketball, baseball, soccer, track, and dance I wasn't super excited about it. But my mom was smart enough, and she knew that when I was 12, you're eligible to start training in the summertime.
And she had been a ballet dancer herself?
She had been, yeah. And so when I was 12, she took me to an audition for School of American Ballet, which is the feeder school into New York City Ballet. And I got in, which was, I really shouldn't have gotten in. I didn't have training or technique. And went away when I was 12 for the first time. And
to New York City.
To New York, and experienced, you know, this world. And it was the first time I'd been in a class of all men, like all guys, and it was a very different emphasis and focus. And it was at that moment that I said, I really want to pursue this. So at age 14, I moved away from home to attend North Carolina School of the Arts in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I got my formal training.
And before we move to Ashley, I have to ask both of you, what was it like to be two young men interested in dance? We hear a lot about bullying now. Were you teased for your interest in dance?
I think at a certain age, everybody's teased for something. There was definitely a phase where it was not cool to be dancing, and that was, you know, my peers and my friends didn't think it was something really interesting. But then as soon as I moved away from home, and I'd come home for spring break, people thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Really?
That I'd moved away and I was pursuing this career. And
it's like fame, you know, on the TV.
So that, it changed overnight.
Yeah, I think I probably had a similar experience. I mean, it wasn't really something that at school I shared a lot and focused on, so I kind of kept it quiet for those reasons. But, you know, I have the added benefit of being 6'6", so
nobody's going to bully you too much. Yeah.
I wasn't teased
And Ashley, what about you? I know you have a background, I believe, in gymnastics as well, and so did dance come as an outgrowth of you know, floor exercises and the dancing you had to do there?
Well, I was, as a child, just extremely energetic, and so I was put in everything to keep me occupied. So that included gymnastics and dance and swimming, and I just loved being physical. But I think the thing that was different about dance as opposed to athletics was the emotional aspect of it. I just felt totally free, and as a young kid, I don't think you can ask for anything else, where you don't have any worries in the world and you're just really yourself. And that's when I felt that dance was my path. And even from a small child, just like John Michael, I remember being 10 years old, and my parents hadn't been involved in the dance world at all, and I did all this research, and I said, there's this audition for the National Ballet School of Canada, and I want to go. And they looked at me, and I was 10 years old, and that's pretty young. And I said, and I'll go there for the whole month, and I'll go to Toronto. And they looked at me just wide-eyed and said, well, if you want to. And so from that point on, I think my enjoyment of it, and it just was clearly my path.
And that's what it takes, parental support, like anything else, or a teacher that says, go for it. We've got some video, Trey, of you working with dancers, and I want to go back to this idea of choreography, because that's what you are. Do you go to school for choreography? Is that how you learn it?
There are some choreographic programs within different institutions, but that was not the path that I took. I was recognized when I was a student at the Houston Ballet Academy. They had a summer choreographic workshop that really any student could participate in. So for me, the artistic director, yeah, well, the director of the company, actually, he saw the work that I did for that summer workshop and kind of singled me out.
And when you choreograph, do you have to think in like 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions or something like that to figure out a dance? I'd love to show people more of that footage of your choreography.
Well, it's a different process really every time I make a piece, but I kind of equate it to, I suppose, a bit like painting or sculpture, in that I go into the studio having an architecture of what I want to create. There's an emotional flow and path that's going to happen. There's usually a point to it, a concept I'm looking to explore. And once that's created, then I go in the studio and try to really fill in all the blanks for that. And I do that very improvisationally. It's very much about...
This is you working here with them.
Yeah. And so like, like creating that solo for Jason, for example. As you can see on the floor, there's a prop. It's a umbrella, but it's also made to look like a ceiling fan, also made to look like one of the Katrina crosses that was on houses in New Orleans after the flooding happened. Had all those concepts and ideas available to sort of draw from, and then I would kind of work with that idea with Jason and try a few things on and see how he would move with it. That would then inspire another idea, which inspires another idea, and then kind of
So Trey, how do you write all this down? How do you archive it? We have video now, but I mean,
yes.
Traditional choreography, sometimes if you look back at it, it's actually, there's different ways that choreographers did it, almost like musical notes. How do you preserve an improvisational, choreography like this?
Historically, it's been an oral tradition. I mean, we know the original Petapaw choreography for the Nutcracker based on it's been handed down from ballerina to ballerina. Then that, of course, then evolved into a notation system. For the most part, dance notation is very cumbersome because there's so many joints to the human body to actually, in every moment, notate exactly what that is. So the advent of video has been quite remarkable in that. But I mean, with video, you're still only seeing a dancer's interpretation at a given moment.
Before we move on, we see the spray painting of the X here, and you mentioned the X before, and I want to show people here, when you do your choreography, you look at what's going on in the world, and in this instance, the X's, the crosses that were put on New Orleans homes after Katrina to mark you know, sometimes incredibly awful things like, you know, people having been killed in the home. So you incorporate that theme of that X. We saw the lady spray painting the X on the dancers.
Yes.
So a lot of your ideas come from real life conditions around us.
I think I'm a bit of an anthropologist in terms of how I approach work, and in cases like this, New Orleans culture, or say another piece that we have in the rep called Aranza, which is exploring Basque culture, it's my entree to be able to learn, and you know, through this process and this construct that I've learned, which is to make choreography, I'm able to gain access to a particular culture and then figure it out.
I think we have some footage of that Basque dance as well that you did specifically for Hyaldi when it came here. So things that are very relevant in your life and in our lives today. Talk a little bit about why you wanted so badly to work with Trey and be in the company.
Yeah. I was dancing in New York with American Ballet Theater, which is sort of the epitome of classical ballet in America. And you know, you do the full-length Swan Lake and Giselle. I remember seeing Trey's work for the first time performed by the Washington Ballet in New York. And it was a piece to Etta James' music called Blue Until June. And it's exactly what I was looking for in my own, you know, with my own dancing, with my own career. There was such an expression I felt it was a human expression. It was not the melodrama you find in classical ballet. It felt very relevant, and it felt like the way the dancers were moving just felt so original, and it felt like it was coming from them. And the overall artistic voice of the ballet moved me emotionally. And as a dancer, sometimes you become immune a little bit to seeing other dance. You see a lot of dance, but it doesn't affect you as strongly, and this really affected me. And then I met Trey a couple years later, and I was just so impressed with his work and the way that he worked with dancers. And when I met Trey, he said, you know, I've really been struggling with, I go make these works at different companies around the world, and I get to work with this group of dancers for 4 weeks, and then I go away, and then that artistic, you know, process kind of ends. And sort of in a precocious, ambitious way, we said, well, what if we put together your own group that was made up of like-minded dancers that really understood your approach? Because Trey's approach is very different than almost any other choreographer I've ever worked with.
In what way?
In that he expects a precision that is very heightened, and you have to really bring your best to rise to it, but he also expects you to bring yourself. And a lot of choreographers only want you just to do what they're telling you to do. Trey's asking you for both.
It's just your body that's there, not necessarily the whole of you, maybe.
Yeah.
The emotional part.
If there's within the choreography a movement that needs to have a piece of emotion within it, he doesn't ask that you act emotional. He asks that you put the emotion in the movement.
We see Ashley. Ashley, why was it so important for you? In fact, so important that you have what's called an extraordinary visa to be here from Canada to dance with Trey.
Well, I actually have a funny story. I was 13 and I was watching Le Ballet Jazz in Montreal, and I saw Blue Until June also. And I was so moved by it, and I remember saying to those around me, I want to do that. And that passed as, you know, you grow and you continue to train, and I didn't even know who the choreographer was. And then when I was 19 years old, I met Trey through fellow artists and teachers of mine, and he invited me into the studio he said, let's make some dance. And instantly, within that moment, I'd never met him, but there was just this really strong sense of he knew what he wanted, and he also was very interested in what you had to bring to it. And at that moment, there was no baggage, there was no extra. We were creating something very special. And after working for about half an hour and creating a solo, I said, I will do anything to work with him. And that led to further auditions, and then when I was finally offered the job, I accepted, of course, and then it was a process of getting me here.
Now you're also all on salary for what, 35 weeks or so out of the year, which is something different. A lot of other dance groups, dance is something they have to do. They have another job at the same time. And so that costs money. You're the executive director. You have to help raise the money. And in addition to dance, I don't know how you do that. That's another question about how many hours you sleep. But what is the funding atmosphere like for dance right now, and for sponsorships for dancers, and being able to keep a dance group in the black?
I think, you know, overall the national climate for the arts, people say is tough, which is definitely the case. We have a $1.5 million budget. We employ our dancers this year about 35 weeks out of the year, which is about 5 weeks above industry standard. Going forward into future years, they're going to be employed even more weeks. We pay our dancers the highest of any American company for our budget size. But I think Trey McIntyre project is ended every year with a financial surplus. We've always been very methodical about our growth.
And that's, I'm sure, in part because of the product, and
Very
also
so.
because perhaps people are choosing to spend their money a little bit more at home now during these times. Do you think they're supporting the arts rather than saying, you know, flying off someplace else for a vacation? What do you see?
I don't know. I mean,
happening?
I don't know if there's an overarching movement toward the arts. I think there's a movement toward arts that speak to people. And you know, one of the reasons that we exist, and one of the reasons we exist in Boise, Idaho, as opposed to in New York or San Francisco, is that we care a lot about creating the context by which people come to the art that we make. And we're able to do that in a city of this scale. We're able to reach people in a way we might not be able to in a larger city, and provide access, and to take dance out of the realm of, you know, what I always call is the Fabergé egg of the arts, and thinking that, you know, it's something delicate over there on the shelf that I can't connect with.
Well, you have performances, and we see one here where people are actually allowed to come in and watch you develop a performance, and that's one way of bringing dance to people, demystifying it, cracking the Fabergé egg, however you want to put it, so that they can see what goes into the process.
There's always so many questions about, I mean, it's so plain to us, we work in the studio every single day, how choreography happens, but it's usually an incredible eye-opener and inspiring for people to see how do you come up with something from nothing. And
another thing that you do are these SpUrbans, spontaneous urban dances. Let's take a look here, and this is at HP, I believe. They're having, in their lunch hour, they're getting a little extra dessert watching you guys dance, but you've done this out in the community as well, down at the Grove, in cafes, all over, where you break out into dance. You, I believe, have an extra grant to help you facilitate this, but what's the reasoning behind it?
What Trey was saying before, we're actually, you know, we're headed to Italy and Greece next week, and Belgium, and part of, you know, the Greek government just collapsed, and they had to get their Congress had to vote to bring us to the country. But one of the reasons they wanted us to come was they wanted us to hit the streets and do these sorts of programs. You know, for us, it's
to be uplifting. You mean for
well,
folks?
I think it's more than that. I think what Trey was saying is we're no longer in an era where you can expect thousands of people to come sit in a dark theater and pay money to watch something on stage. In this world, we're always connected technologically. We're always available, you know, able to watch anything we want online at any time, DVR, you know. So people want it on demand and in their own way. So it's becoming increasingly harder, I think, to get people to come at a certain time to a certain place. So part of that for us is people need to experience dance. It's an art form that has to be felt more than seen or heard. You have to feel it. Dance moves you. I think it's the original language that a baby learns. You learn facial expressions, you learn body language, you learn to read another person. So for us, these spontaneous urban performances, or SpUrbans, bring these little snippets, explosions of dance into someone's everyday life. So they're not expecting it. They're not even necessarily wanting it.
Let's go back to one or two of those photos there that we saw briefly, because I think, you know.
And bringing that to people allows for them to see it, experience it, feel it, and then say, oh, I really enjoyed that. And that might lead to them coming and buying a ticket, or might lead to them becoming patrons of the art, but the goal primarily is for them to experience it.
I want to, you've been asked this so many times, but go back to your comment about choosing Boise. Was Boise chosen because you did a national search and you settled in on Boise after looking at a certain number of cities, or had you been here and just kind of clicked with it and knew that this is a place or that had a void to fill?
Well, it's kind of all those things. We began as a summer touring company, so it was a process of baby steps toward building toward a full-time company. But every summer that we had been a touring company, we came here every year through happenstance. And so we really narrowed it down to maybe 10 to 12 cities we were seriously looking at when it came time to move to a full-time scenario. But it really, it had a lot to do with all the things I said before in terms of what we felt like was possible here. But it was also just really liking the city a great deal. And in fact, several of the dancers who were part of the company at the time, when we said we were going full-time, they said, "Are we going to move to Boise?" Just something about it. There was an
you
immediate.
You like it, Ashley?
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Remind you a little bit of Canada, or
Yes, especially the outdoors.
Yeah.
I'm so inspired by it.
Yeah, and I'm from Wichita, Kansas, and they're not similar cities, other than it's a slower pace and people are kind to each other, and you can get to know the person who lives next to you. And there's a sense in Boise of we're all doing this together, and we all want to build the best possible city that we can. And so that's what we want to do.
Did you worry at all? I mean, because there are existing dance companies here. Did you worry at all coming in with the company and the national attention and the publicity that you've generated, that it could harm the other dance companies here?
Certainly. I mean, worry. I don't know if worry is the right term. It was more that we knew that by helping to build a dance audience and build a place for the arts, that actually we're creating dance patrons and people that want to see work.
Because I have heard people say, honestly, "Oh, there's so much attention on Trey McIntyre, but there are other dance groups in town, But I think the community is all supportive of each other, is it not?
Well, I think all the dance groups in town are having a banner year in terms of ticket sales. I mean, we really firmly believe that we have to create a culture where people are experiencing art and experiencing dance, not just 2-3 times a year. But in New York City, you can go see dance every night of the week, and there's people that do that. They love that art form, and they see it regularly. Boise is a very artistic city, and there's such an incredible offering of organizations and art here happening all the time. I think what we need to do is continue to make the city more of a creative and innovative and dynamic place to live. And by bringing something world-class, what we hear repeatedly is that people have a sense of pride and a sense of ownership now. And they consider this a dance town, where before they didn't. And so I think they can really, have a sense of pride in TMP locally, but also as we travel around the world. But I think that also creates more awareness for the art form.
Ashley, I want to talk to you a little bit about being a dancer, being a young woman, and how you keep your body in shape for what I consider to be not only an artistic form, but also an athletic form. We have a picture of you. I think it's a beautiful picture. I love these pictures, and I'm sure there's a secret to the way that they're done that you won't, or maybe you will divulge. I don't know, but
are you looking at that?
Yeah, the air photos. They're great.
They're taken outdoors, and obviously the dancers on a trampoline.
On a tramp, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and we've got some footage of a dance that's being performed here soon, and was just performed in New Orleans, called Ma Maison. Let's look at that while I'm talking with you about what you need to do to prepare your body to do this, because you want to be trim or thin, but strong and not anorexic, which is a problem in the industry and in many other like-minded things like gymnastics and ice skating. So how do you keep yourself in shape, Ashley?
I think when your focus is to be healthy and to be strong, I think your body knows what to do. When you're working as hard as we work from 10:30 to 5:30 every day, and then in the theater we'll run the show twice. It's not usually a question of weight or appearance, because what you're concentrated on is keeping healthy and keeping not injured.
How do you do that? Do you eat little meals throughout the day? Do you eat?
I think it's different for everybody. I think getting the highest possible nutrition to your muscles is ideal, the most water you can have. And we are able to get a lot of body work done that's really important in terms of chiropractic, acupuncture, massage. And that is a perk to this job that is really coveted over other dance jobs, because when you're able to take care of your body, have this long contract and all the support that Boise has given to us, you're able to come to work strong and ready to go every day,
Right.
and not feeling depleted. So.
Yeah, because that is so important, is to keep your body going, not deplete it, like you said. And when you travel, that's got to be even harder. We saw Ma Maison real briefly because we have only a little bit of time left, and I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. That is also a dance that incorporates themes having to do with New Orleans, including kind of more dirt-like elements and skeletons.
Sure.
And, talk a little bit about what attracted you to not only those themes of New Orleans that are a little bit darker, and the Preservation Hall Jazz Band with which you worked.
That was the first piece I made in collaboration with Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and what I was drawn to in kind of shaking down the things that were interesting to me about New Orleans was that the way that these different cultures dealt with death, and the way that they incorporated death into their daily life, and ended up really celebrating it and making death really a reason to live your life to its fullest every day.
Well, people can see that performance soon, or pieces of it online, and I would encourage them to do that. And as we close, I know that you have an interest in a program that some people may remember called Free to Be You and Me, which Marlo Thomas hosted, and it was also a book in the 1970s. It influenced you, yes? And you'd like to create a dance based on Free to Be You and Me?
Yeah, I was definitely a Free to Be kid, and recently we were performing at Jacob's Pillow in the Berkshires, and the house manager came up and told me, Alan Alda's in the audience, and I thought, how cool is that? And it said, please tell him, extend an invitation if he wants to come backstage and meet everybody and meet the dancers. It would be great. And so he came back with 3 of his friends, and I was so starstruck, and I was telling him, what an amazing actor I thought he was, but that something that had a big impact on me was Free to Be You and Me and that program that he worked on.
Because?
Well, it was really how I was raised. It was this idea of that you could grow up and become anything you want to be.
And gender neutral, basically. If you want to, if you're a boy, you want to dance. If you're a girl, you want to drive a truck.
Sure, that was a big part of it.
That.
And at the time, it was quite revolutionary. I didn't know it was at the time, but anyway, it just happened to be. It was the entire team from Free to Be You and Me was there to see the show, and they've really granted me access to be able to now create a work based on that, using those materials.
And one last thing, we have a beautiful photo, at least I think it's beautiful, of, I think it might be you, John Michael, dancing for a group of boys at an alternative school. If there is a young person listening to this who thinks they want to be a dancer, might live in a rural area, not accessible to dance, what should they do? Where should they go?
I mean, you can.
We only have about 30 seconds left.
The thing about technology is you can find it anywhere. So start finding things that inspire you, and then when you're passionate, convince your parents this is what you want to do. Self-determine that this is the future you want for yourself, and it can happen.
Find a summer program, maybe. Great. Well, wonderful. Thanks to all of you for talking about the Trey McIntyre project, what goes into it, and much success in your future endeavors. Thank you for being here, and thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning in to this edition of Dialogue.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, become a friend on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.